How do you handle season shifts as a homeschooler? Are you noticing a shift in seasons in your part? Me, right outside that window, is a bit of snowfall. It's a beautiful, bright, sunshiny day today, but yesterday was our first snowfall that I think is going to stay for the winter. It's a reminder to me that the seasons have shifted. The first reminder usually comes from Starbucks. Usually between summer and fall, pumpkin spice lattes are my first sign. And now we're transitioning into the peppermint mocha latte. Not really a Starbucks fan per se. We have some amazing cafes in our town, but the advertising is phenomenal. And it is the first sign, probably usually, before even the leaves begin to change. But the leaves have begun to change. So how do you handle seasonal shifts in your homeschool? Do you notice it? I can't say I noticed it for the first few years. I had too much going on inside my home to realize that there was something going on outside my home. This is usually the time where the kids probably should be outside playing more because the weather is reasonable. It's colder. It's not flip-flop weather, but they're still wearing them. It is definitely colder, but it's not as cold as it likely will be in our parts. So what do you do to handle the seasonal shifts in your homeschool? As part of my show and tell this morning, I want to show you a delicious start to my day that usually helps energize my brain more than anything else that I eat in the morning. And I don't always do it, but mostly I do it. And I'm very grateful right now that I have a few kids that are eating really cleanly because they're dancers and they're also very aware how food affects their skin. So they're really useful influencers, and they're also great creators of this food. It is a green smoothie. This particular one is called the Classic Green Monster, and it's from one of my all-time favorite cookbooks, Oh She Glows. This is actually a vegan recipe book, and I'm not vegan. In fact, I process my own meat chickens at the end of summer. But if I've learned anything, when I have had transitions into a lighter diet, this particular cookbook is amazing because everything in this cookbook tastes really good, and it has opened my eyes to how food that isn't meat-based can be really delicious. There were times when my oldest daughter was creating something vegan that sat in my fridge, and I asked her, "Hey, Hannah, could you get rid of this face mask? It's kind of looking gross." And she's like, "It's not a face mask, Mom, it's food." And I'm like, "Ooh, okay." All right. So there can be really tasty food. Didn't try it, by the way. It didn't look like food, didn't think it was food. But she swears by it. She had chocolate pudding. But this always provides something delicious. And the Classic Green Monster, so good for your brain. It really does energize you as you start the day. So before I get started with a discussion of Homeschool Hygge practices and how to incorporate comfort into our homeschools in the seasonal shifts, just want to let you know that my podcast just released this morning an interview with Sarah Gorner. She is on Instagram at Sarah13Go, and she has a blog called The Happiness Here. When I read her bio online, I recognized me. I was really intrigued to meet her because a lot of her interests are very similar to mine. Hiking and cross-country skiing, and she's a reader. She's an avid reader that even talks about, I think she talked about 3 or 4 books when I asked her what her favorite book was, and I'm like, this is my girl. And anyways, our conversation is a cornucopia of topics. I had a hard time naming this one because there were so many interesting thoughts. She is an aspiring writer. She's a writer, but she wants to get more into it now that her 3 boys are growing up. She has 3 boys that are swimmers, and she used the example of swimming. She's not a professional swimmer or regular swimmer herself, but she said that homeschooling sometimes feels like a constant front stroke or backstroke, but it's kind of halfway in the water, kind of not. Sometimes it feels like you're drowning, but you're not. You're staying above water most of the time. And I went, wow, so true. And that is one of so many tidbits of wisdom that come from Sarah Gorner. So I want to introduce you to her. Check out my podcast, Homeschool Mama Self-Care, and you can listen to her chat about all sorts of different things. So just probably the last half hour, I finished a read aloud with my son. One of the first ones that we read this year is called The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Spear. It's the second time I've read it because I've read a lot of the read alouds I do with my first two daughters, or maybe I did my first three daughters when I was doing them, and my youngest was he was a bit too young to really know what was going on at the time, and first two daughters definitely would remember this book. But right at the very end, the author has a discussion from the main character's point of view. Her name is Kit, in accepting seasonal shifts. And I just thought, wild. Just as I'm about to share with you how to engage or embrace seasonal shifts, I read this. All at once, Kate was aware that this New England, which had shown her the miracle of autumn and the white wonder of snow, had a new secret in store. This time, it was a subtle promise, a tantalizing hint of beauty still withheld, a beckoning to her spirit to follow she knew not where. She had forgotten that summer would come again, that the green would spread over the frozen fields, that the earth would be turned up to the sun and the seed sown, and that the meadows would renew themselves. Was this what strengthened these New Englanders to endure the winter? The knowledge that summer's return would be all the richer for the waiting. One thing I know for sure, as a person that lives in 4 seasons, I very much embrace each season because it is always changing. So that was a beautiful way to end that book, and I'm glad I got to share it with you because it's a book that I recommend reading with your kids. I have many. This room is filled with my favorite treasures, books. I have a hard time getting rid of books. If there's anything I can't get rid of, it is a good book. So today I'm going to share with you 20 easy to adopt self-care practices, homeschool hygge practices. Except 2 thoughts. One, there's more than 20 now. I've got a whole bunch more. And I'm going to move through some of them quickly. You might already have adopted some of them. But the other thought I have is that the intention behind these self-care practices is to be intentional about embracing seasonal approaches to self-care practices. So I'm going to start by saying, what is hygge? Is everybody familiar with hygge? The Merriam Webster dictionary says it's a quality of coziness that makes a person feel content and comfortable. Another dictionary says hygge is a quality of coziness and comfortable conviviality that engenders a feeling of contentment or well-being, regarded as a defining characteristic of the Danish culture. Hygge sounds comfortable. It sounds cozy. It is, in my opinion, a synonym for homeschool. At least that's what we aspire to do as homeschoolers, right? Create an environment that is cozy and comfortable and content. And no, it isn't always, but that is our goal. So homeschool and hygge, I suggest, are synonyms. Seasonal shifts are challenging to do because sometimes we look forward to it and we get excited about it, like the transition, I do anyways, the transition between summer and autumn, but not because I'm losing summer, really because I'm creating more routine in my homeschool. And it feels to me, and I notice it in my kids, that everybody wants something to change or to shift. And so we embrace the routine again. We create new routines. We include new activities. We're looking forward to using those pencils and all the new things, the new books and the new science kits and the new, all of that. But I'm embracing that part of my year. I'm not embracing the lack of summer. I'm not embracing summer disappearing. Not really. Even though I have made the best out of winter. I have learned to use winter. And I also happen to live in a part of the world where winter is really not that cold, and yet we get plenty of snow. So we kind of have the perfect combination for winter. So, Homeschool Hygge, 2 words that go together like a synonym. And those 2 synonyms speak cozy all over to me. So here are the Homeschool Hygge practices that I've compiled that we can incorporate into our homeschools to embrace the new season. First of all, I just want to add that embracing the season is a requirement. It's challenging to accept that things change. My son just turned 12 over the weekend, which means, and by the way, my youngest son turned 12. That's a big shift for me in here because I don't even really remember what it was like to have a whole bunch of kids all together and have to multitask constantly. Sort of, I kind of do. But when I'm talking to other homeschool moms of many kids, I am reminded that I have settled into a very comfortable, familiar routine. Everyone's familiar with it. We all work together fairly well most days. And it was pretty hectic when they were younger. But my youngest is 12. And it turns out the seasons keep shifting. The kids keep getting older. Things always are changing. So first and foremost, we have to embrace the seasonal shift. It is what it is. When we fight it, we make it harder for us to enjoy our lives. And when we embrace it, we can find practices to make it satisfying. So, transition with intention. For me, Starbucks, a reminder about pumpkin spice lattes is my first sign that the season's shifting. In fact, we're not just moving from pumpkin spice latte. Now we're moving into peppermint mocha latte season. Every year I aspire to one of those each year. And every year I go, the coffee's okay. It's way too sweet. Love the whipped cream. And very expensive. But I embrace the Starbucks lattes. And no, I am not getting paid to share that with you. Transition with intention though. When you get those reminders, begin to accept that things are shifting and then begin to incorporate the following possible strategies to enjoy this season. Kitty cats on beds with math workbooks is my first suggestion. I don't know if you're an owner of pets, but I find getting cozy with a soft cuddly blanket and a cuddly kitty on your bed is a fun transition into the fall season. Recently, I've had requests on Christmas wish lists for a finger monkey. I don't even know where one finds a finger monkey, but it's like a real thing and it's really tiny and pretty sure I'd have to get permission from the government to have one. And a miniature pig for another child. We own chickens. I can't imagine having a miniature pig inside. It definitely is not happening in this household. But there's something about teeny tiny little animals while you're doing your homework, or while you're doing your studies on your bed. That's kind of fun. How about tea? I know that most of us have already incorporated tea. It's a rite of passage as a homeschooled kid in North America to drink tea long before other people have drank tea, probably in the rest of the world to drink a tea at a young age. But what about changing up your homeschool flavor choices, like chai? My kids were introduced to chai when we were in Kenya, and there was a strong East Indian influence there, which surprised me. I learned about Indian food there. and chai, a lot of really, really tasty chai. So the kids know how to make chai, we bring that out. But I noticed yesterday Celestial Seasonings has all sorts of really neat new kinds of flavored teas. So we could always change a different tea choice. Candles. We're going to talk about candles because Homeschool Hygge, like when I think Hygge, I definitely think candles. You don't have to turn it on for any particular reason. You could just light them just because. The light is lessened by the end of the day. So if you're doing an afternoon history read aloud, you could turn on a candle and say, this is the time we're going to do a read aloud, or start a fire. Not encouraging pyromania, but if you have a fireplace, you could do it in the morning with your read aloud, or you could do it in the afternoon with different studies, and that could be a routine where you always start the fire. Pajamas. Pajamas are also a mainstay of homeschool families. It is a rite of passage to own more than a few pairs of pajamas for the kids and a few more yoga pants or casual pants for the mom. But why not create a routine of a certain, maybe pull out a specific kind of pajama just for a certain season. Morning skincare routines. Sometimes in the summer things get busy and I just splash my face with water, but we could create more of a 2 or 3, maybe 5-minute skincare routine intentionally in the morning before the sun is out, and dab that face with a little bit of moisturizer of some sort. Get into a pattern, a habit of doing something just for 5 minutes. And if you think about it, this next idea is actually one that most people, a lot of moms I should say, include all year long: chocolate and wine, especially since the pandemic started. One of my interview guests on my podcast actually said, after a while since the pandemic, this chocolate and wine and Netflix thing isn't just like a self-care strategy, it can become addiction. And that's true, it can. 2 ounces of dark chocolate after dinner, wine for weekends, practices that can make the homeschool mama really happy. And I said, I really think that we should start a homeschool mama wine club. And I have since actually joined a homeschool mama Facebook thread all about homeschool mamas drink wine. My editor for my book, Homeschool Mama Self-Care, said, not everybody drinks wine or coffee, and maybe you want to account for that. And I said, well, I don't think so. I think they do. Morning cuddles with books and blankies. Afternoon cuddles with books and blankies. Evening read-alouds with books and blankies and cute kids. Neighborhood walks. We would probably be doing it no matter what, but we could incorporate into our day, no matter the weather, a little nature walk around the neighborhood. As we do that, we get more familiar with what's going on in our part of the world. When we first moved to where we live right now, on a homestead, 3 acres outside, 20 minutes outside of a small town in the mountains, a beautiful place to enjoy the nature and just to enjoy the outdoor world, I wanted to get familiar with whatever we could forage here. I wanted to know when we could, gather mushrooms, or what kind of birds were here, what kind of animals were really here, or learn to name all the trees. And I was really eager to start that practice. I love doing that kind of stuff. But I realized that as time has gone by, and I spend a lot of time outside because that's just what I do, I have naturally learned those things. And I have occasionally got curious about, hey, what's this thing? I went to the museum, the local museum, not too long ago, and discovered that some plant is native to this area, and it is edible, and it was a wild raspberry. It is delicious. It makes the most incredible jam. And that was simply because that awareness grew simply because I spend a lot of time outside. I happen to go to a museum because that's what we homeschool moms do. And I happened to notice that this was something that was native to our area. So these things that we learn them naturally. We don't need to be always intentional with nature study. We just need to spend regular times outside, like neighborhood walks, even in the more challenging seasons to get outside. So spend a little bit of time with your kids outside, nature walking every day. Afternoon skis on the canal in winter flurries. Okay, so you might not have a canal, you might not have or you might not have cross-country skis. That's something that we do, but I would encourage you to intentionally choose certain exercise activities or sports that the kids like, or sports that you or your husband or your partner likes, and be intentional about using or incorporating that sport just for a specific month in the year. So for a long time, we always thought September is a great time to get onto the tennis courts because they're not as busy compared to the summer, especially during a school day. And it's a little bit cooler, not too hot, but not too cold. And so I associate September with a tennis racket. Different sports for different months means that you value those different activities at different seasons of the year. Documentaries. I love documentaries. Can't get enough of them. They are everywhere. You can find them on Knowledge Network. Have You Met Curiosity Stream, Netflix, Disney Channel, pretty much anywhere. But if you can incorporate one afternoon a week with a bowl of popcorn and a documentary, it's a nice way to get cozy and get comfortable inside and to set apart this season differently than maybe what you were doing in the spring or summer season. Hot food. I even crave hot food more in the winter than in the summer. In the summer, I'm all about light, fresh salads and light breads and like really light fare. Whereas in the winter, I love hot soups. I love them so much. I need to make them in smaller batches because I'm the only one that loves them that much. Hot soups and hot bread. Fast food. And I don't mean McDonald's, and I don't mean Tim Hortons because I'm Canadian, or anything like that. I mean, pull out the crock pot and get familiar with how to use the crock pot. It can be a fast food if you can throw things in the morning, and at the end of the night, when you're ready to start dinner preparation, it's already done. And I would suggest frozen fish. Do people in your family like frozen fish? I have a couple that do and a couple that definitely don't, but that is my go-to for fast food if I haven't remembered to pull something out of the freezer, because it cooks up fast even if it's frozen. Spotify, warming the sound waves. There is something that I do intentionally at different seasons, and I think this morning I was thinking Vivaldi's third, what is it called? Autumn, I think it's the Autumn collection. But beautiful music, or Pelecis. There's another composer that I really enjoy, but choosing certain musicians specifically, and of course it doesn't have to be classical, but it could be a specific musician that you pull out for certain seasons and have it lightly playing before breakfast and before you meet for morning circle time or before you do a morning read aloud. A hot tub dip at the end of the day. We're saving for a wood-burning hot tub right now. So we don't have one, and not everybody has one, but everybody has a bathtub. Does everybody have a bathtub? Most people have bathtubs. Have a hot bath or hot shower at the end of the day. Sleeping in. It's almost hard to, I don't know, I've occasionally woken my kids up in the morning to get ready for their studies or to get ready for their day. I certainly will do that if I know that they're going to be way later than they need to because they wake up grouchy, and that for me is a sign that I would wake someone up. But overall, this is our opportunity to let kids sleep in. When the time zone or when the time shift happens, we all get a little bit more tired and not quite sure how to adjust to that. So let yourself just naturally acclimate and let your kids do that too. You get to sleep in, you get to determine whatever you want to do in your homeschool. So you don't have to start at the same time the school bell rings at an actual brick and mortar school. You can let the kids sleep in and get all the good rest that they need. A total advantage to homeschooling. add coffee. I'm told not everybody drinks wine and coffee. Different coffee? Probably not a Starbucks sweetened coffee every day, but definitely coffee with your own pumpkin spice mix thrown on top. And supplements. If you're not going to do coffee, I would suggest turmeric tea. It's an anti-inflammatory. When I talked to my husband about, do you notice the seasonal shifts? He said, oh yeah, in my bones. He's not yet 50, but he notices it, a little more achy and creaky. And even he suggested to me turmeric tea, which is a fabulous anti-inflammatory. He's not regularly drinking turmeric tea, but I am. And it really does. It works as an anti-inflammatory, but be careful as you start because it can be quite potent. The first time I took it, I was having an inflammation issue, a medical issue that was known to be inflammatory. And so I took a solid dose of turmeric tea. I think it was like a tablespoon. And by the next morning, I definitely was relieved of my discomfort from the inflammation, but I also had a massive rash, and that's a very itchy rash all over my body. And I've learned that that is also a common experience for many people that use turmeric tea on the regular. So be careful how much you take, titrate up, but it does really work. So try turmeric tea. Supplements in general. If you can't get the sunshine, you got to get your vitamin D. So I think recently they even are suggesting that vitamin D is beneficial. And when you have higher levels of vitamin D in your body, it's beneficial for how you handle or deal with COVID, or exposure to COVID. So vitamin D, important. And if you can't or don't want to take it in a supplement form, you could also, besides going outside, even in the northern regions or northern hemisphere, it is still difficult, even if you're outside all day, to get enough vitamin D throughout certain months of the year. A daylight, a UV light. If you sit in front of a UV light for 15 minutes, you are creating enough vitamin D for you for that day. And it really does help to wake you up and to adjust to days that aren't like this day, where it is actually overcast and not quite so bright and sunshiny. I include the daylight with a morning routine, like with whatever inspirational reading I'm doing, with a journal, all that, and that time zone, or that time period, I really enjoy turning that on and waking up with a cup of coffee. I'm also going to suggest that if you really want to acclimate to the new season, choose when you start getting bored of your routine, because that will happen. It's not just the kids that show restlessness towards the routine, it's also us. So choose one subject a week. Maybe that's your goal, is let them dive deep into whatever the subject is that they're loving or passionate about right now. You write it down so that you can remind yourself that they're really doing stuff. It's okay, they're really doing stuff. But choose one subject a week instead of all the subjects. Or delete a subject that they really don't like for a week. You could do that. It's only for a week. If you're on the regular keeping track of what they do, you'd be surprised at how much they do. I think that's the reason to keep record of the activities that they do, and to recognize that their learning opportunities don't have to come in the form of a traditional school subject or in a traditional schooled approach. So keep track of it so that you know what they're doing, and then occasionally delete a subject. So those are my suggestions for homeschool hygge practices to help you acclimate to the new season, to shift into the new season. I ask you, what kind of homeschool hygge practices do you already include, and what are some that you are going to include in your homeschool now? If you haven't checked out my book, Homeschool Mama Self-Care, I have a preview down below if you want to take a look and see what things I have to offer there. I am here to help you turn your homeschool challenges into your homeschool charms. I get, as a homeschool mom still, I get what a challenge it can be as a homeschool mom to do this homeschool thing, and I'm here to help you out. So if you're looking for a little encouragement, check out the preview to my book, Homeschool Mama Self-Care. Thanks for joining me, and I hope your week is charmed. Talk to you soon.